If you want 100% from your workforce, you need to put 100% into your workforce. You can't just sit back and say, right, we want this done, without thinking about it. Is there a health and safety issue? Have we done a risk assessment? Have we done this? You don't go in shouting and blazing about that. You just go, I noticed, by the way, when I was passing by, that bumper on that van. Do you want to have a look? Don't say you haven't done your job right. You haven't been doing a van check. I was just passing by and I noticed that the T-bar is a bit bashed. Did you notice it earlier at all? They might lie to you and say, oh yeah, I noticed it and I've wrote it down. They haven't checked it, but they haven't checked it. But you give them that opportunity.
Syed Hadi Naqvi from Usdaw.
Hi everyone, it's me, Syed Hadi Naqvi, the UK's TUC Organising Award-winning champion of 2024. And yeah, it's been that long. So I'm glad that you guys have joined me for another episode of my Unmatched podcast, where I bring together the worlds of trade unionism, politics and business, and show how closely intertwined all three really are. I know that there can be a them and us element at times, but most of the time there's a lot more similarities and a lot of overlapping that takes place. And one of the people that I've brought in today, my guest, is Davie McCuish, who is a lifelong trade unionist. He's been doing this since before I was even born. He started his trade union journey in 1972. He's from Glasgow in Scotland and has been a shop steward or trade union activist since 1978, becoming a shop steward for the trade union Usdaw in 2016, as well as being a Labour activist since he was 9 years of age. So I'm really looking forward to hearing his story, his journey into the trade union world, how the trade union world has formulated his worldview, as well as the world of politics as well. And I think you guys are going to take away something really, really wonderful from this, especially if you're an aspiring trade unionist or politician and you just don't know whether the battles that you are enduring, if they're worth it. So it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to everyone Dave McCuish. Dave, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. In fact, I've been better, but today's been a good day. Thank you.
Dave, absolute pleasure. I've known you in Usdaw since I became a shop steward in 2020, August 2020. So I've been with Usdaw since May 2019. And yeah, it's been an absolute honor and pleasure to meet you. You've re-inspired a lot of people throughout your time within Usdaw, as well as within your trade union activities just in general. So what I wanted to find out from you is, from your humble beginnings in Glasgow, what made you get into the sort of trade union movement and trade unionism? What made you get into the trade union movement?
To get into the trade union movement, we first need to understand what trade unionism is. A lot of people have misconceptions about trade unions, especially in current climate, and obviously taking back to the 80s when we had the miners' strike. All people seem to think is trade unions are a bunch of upstarts who are out to destroy the business community, the business world, for their selfish own means. It's a complete fallacy. Anybody can be a trade union. All it is a coming together of people who want to stand up against oppression and exploitation and get themselves a better working deal. That's what a true trade unionist is. And that is it. It's a coming together of people. It's a peaceful coming together. There's no violence, as we see, or we were led to believe in the 80s under Mrs. Thatcher's government, where picket lines were attacking police and such. That was later brought to light as a complete lie, that she actually set up the charge of the police into the picket lines. Trade unionism itself is a coming together of people to fight for the greater good of their own betters, so to speak. So that's what mainly got me into it, is anybody can be a trade unionist, but to understand it first is the most important thing and know what you're actually standing for. That takes me back to my childhood. I used to think way back then that to be in a union was a bad thing, because at that time, the media, I was only a young child. Like most people, even nowadays, I believed things that I read in the paper or saw on the television, not realising it was manipulated to suit the, at the time, government. It wasn't until I grew up, actually got into the working cycle and actually joined a union and realised, hang on, that was a lot of nonsense. Then I started to dig deeper and deeper into the movement and realised what it stood for and what it was bringing to me as an individual. So yeah, that's how I got involved in it.
When you had that discovery of the fiction from the fact, the narrative versus the reality, it must have been like a light bulb moment that things really changed for you.
Yeah.
What was
It was
the greatest realization that you actually had?
right. Again, I'm going to take you back to, I'm sounding as if I'm against the Conservatives. Well, I'm a Labour guy, so yes, I am. But that's beside the point. It was during another very famous Prime Minister, which was Edward Heath, during his period of time in office. Not many people on your podcast will be able to go back to that time, which was the early 70s, when we had massive power strikes, 3-day working week, and so on and so forth. I was brought up in a little village in Glasgow, a very famous village, believe it or not. I was brought up in a place called Govan, which is famous for people like Billy Connolly, Alec Ferguson, Kenny Dalglish. Obviously, I don't fall into those categories. However, it was also a centre for, it was the most famous shipbuilding place. Most of the great ships, all our warships, the British warships, were Clyde built. And one of the most famous, where I'm living now, I live near to one of the most famous ships that was Clyde built. And you can check it up. There's a plaque there, it tells you, and that's at the Cutty Sark. It was Clyde built. So it's a very, very famous shipbuilding industry. During the time, the Heath government decided to close all these shipyards down. There was 6, I think, maybe 4, between 4 and 6 that he was planning to close. My dad then was a member of the shipbuilding union, and it was the trade union shop steward at that time decided to call industrial action to save the shipyard. His idea of industrial action was completely different to everybody else's idea. He had what was known as a work-in, where he locked out the managers and all the workers were locked in, and they started preparation and completed the building of a ship. And to the embarrassment of the Heath government, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth launched that ship. That saved the shipyards. It was highly publicised at the time, and it has never been equalled in the trade union movement. Nobody had ever heard of tons of a work-in where they worked to save their jobs.
Now that's fascinating, because when we hear of industrial action or direct action like that, it is usually the strikes and these kind of things that, yes, it's the last resort, but this is quite unique, that it was almost like the proof is there that the workforce is needed because the workforce is valued and skilled. And in recent times, what we've seen is that the workers have been put down. They're not valued because you can get cheaper in China. Again, I'm going a lot of what Liz Truss was going down the road of with her book about productivity and things like that. Personally, British workers, well renowned, especially their engineering. Everything came from here in that sense. The Industrial Revolution, so on and so forth, all started from here. And it's been world leading ever since. What made that take place? Was it the cost of keeping the shipyards open, or was it just the incompetence of getting the revenue in? Mismanagement? Was it down to government regulations?
It was down to, ultimately it was down to the government trying to cut costs, which, as I said at the time, it was happening not just in the shipbuilding industry, but at that time in 1971-72, we had loads of strikes. People were stocking up. You'll remember most recently 2020, when people were stocking up on toilet rolls and pasta.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we had a similar situation in the 70s where we were stocking up on candles because power strikes, power cuts were a constant thing. I was doing my homework by candlelight not because we couldn't afford the electricity, it's because they cut the electricity off. We had what was known as the 3-day working week, which came under the government. People were only working for 3 days out of 7. So productivity was an all-time low. Thankfully, it led to the demise of the Tory government. Thankfully, it ended, but it brought to the forefront the power of the union movements and how they can come together to overthrow a government, basically. The story behind the shipbuilding one was to show that people did want to work. They weren't lazy. They weren't just out to get extra money. They weren't fighting for money. They were fighting to save their jobs. They weren't wanting extra pay. That wasn't the idea behind it. A lot of people think, well, they're just being greedy. They're trade unions. All they want is more money for less work. These guys were working for free. Well, they were getting strike pay, which was, as you know yourself, is an absolute pittance. But they were working basically for free to show that's all they wanted to do. They just wanted to do their job. They wanted to work. They wanted to keep those jobs. And that was the idea behind it.
Hey content creators, this is my chance to do a quick review of a product I bought on a TikTok shop and I think you guys are going to love it. It's a green screen disc that fits on the back of a chair. It can fit to almost any surface, and if you've got a area like a flat or a single bedroom or a bedsit where you're living in where you've got no space, this is ideal for those who are using it for things like Twitch, streaming, or just general YouTube videos. Like so. So get yours in the TikTok shop today. I'll leave the link in here. Take it that brought about a camaraderie or a brotherhood element as well, because what I've seen within the trade union movement is that people come together under a common purpose, regardless of background, race, color, creed, you name whatever differences you can have. When it comes to a solidarity movement, the trade union movement, you can't beat that. I suppose within that shipping element there, you had a brotherhood, which probably is still, with the values now, is still quite strong. I know with Scotland, there is a very strong, proud trade unionist ethos or doctrine that runs through Scotland. But I also, again, going into elements of post the Ted Heath or Edward Heath's government, when he got kicked out, you had elements of like Dennis Skinner coming along, marching and looking to push up wages. And that seemed, the narrative is that it kept on pushing up inflation. It had the issue with inflation because the wages went up, the inflation went up. But from some of the interviews I've had, that seems to be a fallacy, that if you push up wages, it's going to push up inflation. It seems, and I'm not totally sure where this all came from.
Again, it's again, I'm going to be picking on the poor Conservatives, but again, it's their manipulation of the media and people actually believing what they're reading and seeing on these newsreels and whatever. They pick and choose what they want to show. Again, coming back to the 80s when we had the miners' strikes, they didn't show the peaceful side of things. They would only show the section where the picket lines were actually charging back at the police. Nothing to do with the fact that the police charged them first and they were retaliating. So they only show the one side, and that gives you a false positive. So it's giving you a false narrative. What you're being shown is these strikers attacking people or attacking police, not what actually started the ball rolling there, and that they're actually retaliating or protecting themselves. You never got that. So it was a false narrative. We were shown what the government wanted to show us to make us believe that these people were all so bad. And this was brought to light most recently when, after Mrs. Thatcher passed away and the documents were released, that she had actually ordered the charge on the picket lines.
The North, definitely. You go to parts of the North like Liverpool, they don't hold her in high regard. Margaret Thatcher, they actually despise her. You go to parts of South London like Brixton, when she passed away, they celebrated. And it is one of those things. She was a highly divisive figure, but for good reason. But you also probably went through, I learned about this during my diploma of employment law about blacklisting, and thinking this is horrifying because people are standing up for their rights, and more importantly, they're actually putting the targets on their backs to ensure that their colleagues do go out there and can earn a wage to support themselves and their family.
Yeah.
And for that, as reward, they get blacklisted. Did you ever go through anything like that yourself, or did you know of anyone who went through that?
Fortunately, no. I didn't have that or know of anybody who had to go through such. Well, I suppose Jimmy Reid, who was the instigator for the shipyards, would probably have been subject to that. But again, I was still a child at the time, so I wouldn't have understood it. But no, I had the good fortune to have worked in an industry, which was, at the time, I'd wanted to become a worker in the shipyards, just like my dad and my uncles and whatever. But again, when I became of age, I had the misfortune of coming under the Thatcher government and the Thatcher regime. So I moved into, at the time, transport, and became a member in 1978 of the Transport and General Workers Union, one of the biggest trade union movements in the country at the time. And within a year, I was a shop steward with them. But yeah, because it was such a powerful union, ultimately because of what it covered, a strike taken by the Transport and General Workers Union would have brought the whole country to a standstill, because it covered all the heavy trucking, well, anything from mopeds that we've got constantly nowadays with Deliveroo and such, all the way through to the massive 40-foot trailers plus drag, so it covered all of that. And I think the only time that we had a need to come close to any sort of strike was when they were taking everything away from road transport and putting it onto rail transport. So that was the only time that I had a conflict of interest into whether we were going on strike or not.
Now,
Thankfully, it was voted against.
Sorry about that. I interrupted you there.
No, that's fine.
But as a shop steward, because your role as a shop steward in the transport industry would also require you to represent people as well and stay on top of many of the legislative changes that was there to ensure health and safety at work, tachographs if they're like 7.5 ton vehicles, things like that. For you, looking at you now as a lifelong trade unionist, what sort of knowledge can you impart to other upcoming shop stewards? Because it can be, when you're looking at legislation, when you're looking at employment law, when you're looking at how to represent someone, you want to fight to make sure that you save their jobs, essentially. But when you're going into your very first meeting, how did you feel?
Absolutely terrified. To be bluntly honest, I was absolutely terrified. I was prepared, and that's something that I would advise any shop steward, is always be prepared. Be prepared not just in what you're going to present, but be prepared in the fact that try and think of what the questions they're going to be asking. Try and sort of get into their mind as to what they'll be looking for in order to get rid of this person, and therefore have those answers ready. Might never happen.
I take it policy as well, because thankfully we're in the day and age where internet, you can access policies almost immediately. Whereas in your sort of, when using that transport union, finding policies might have been quite tricky.
Yeah. Especially way back in the good old days, when the tachographs were wax discs, trying to argue that a driver hadn't broken the law. You could actually scratch a tachograph and make it look as if you'd been driving at high speed by the use of a paperclip. And it was being able to identify where it was actually cut by the tachograph reader. Or
give me 1 second, Dave. 1 second. It's downstairs.
Not the little one.
Down there.
Not down there.
Give me a second, Dave.
Yeah, no worries.
Right. Try downstairs. The last time I saw it was downstairs. I know. Go. Okay. Good boy. God, this isn't live, huh?
Never alter children and animals.
Yeah, tell me about it. I had the Nika McLaurian, and the same thing happened with her. He just walked in. Right, so we were talking about the tachographs that you can actually be scratched because there were wax discs at the time with a paperclip.
Yeah.
And could be falsely made out that they had broken the law.
Yeah. So back in them days, unlike today, a tachograph is like a credit card. So everything's recorded that way, and everything is recorded. It's all computerized. Back in the day, you didn't have that. Everything was done manually. Your tachograph reader, you had to actually physically turn the key to rest mode. You had to turn the key to other duties. And you had to, that was part of my job, was to ensure that each driver knew exactly what he was doing when he was out on the road, to keep himself safe and legal.
And
But
that must have
that
been a
was my
challenge.
job.
So when you was representing, you go into this room where you got a manager in there, you've got your person that you're defending, someone's taking the notes, and you're terrified in your very first meeting. Clearly, you didn't show it because every time I met you, you've been as cool as a cucumber. ACAS rules are that we can't answer on their behalf because we're not lawyers, but we can, this is the thing that I didn't learn when I became a shop steward. I went in there like a lawyer and started answering on behalf of the person that I was defending because she couldn't speak English properly and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And I saw it was almost like a persecution. How did you manage to handle that kind of sense of justice to make sure it prevailed and not get into the other person's face that is actually doing their job as well?
Yeah.
They, or supposedly doing their job.
The easiest way to work that one is to my more recent shop steward role, which was with Usdog, is to play the game. I know that sounds a bit strange, but yeah, play the game. Use their policies against themselves. So make sure you know the policy. Even if you don't, if you work in it, for instance, Sainsbury's, look up the policy for attendance, look up the policy for grievance and disciplinary procedures, and you'll find the role of the rep. A lot of the managers haven't got a blooming clue. So you catch them off guard because they haven't read it properly. Advice to a shop steward before going into a meeting is read everything, put it down, pick it back up, read it again. You'll see something different. Put it down, have a coffee, come back, pick it up, read it about 4 or 5 times, and every time you'll read something different. And once you're absolutely certain that your notes are fine, read it again for one final time. Then you go into you're fully prepared. If you look at most policies and procedures for the role of the rep, it will say that you can be accompanied by a companion or a member of the trade union who can speak on your behalf, who can make an opening case for you, closing case. Ultimately, the only thing we can't do is answer a direct question. However, we have the power of adjournment. So if they're asked a direct question, and they must tell you this at the start, that you can adjourn at any time. And you play on that as well. If they ask a question, you go, I'm adjourning. Well, adjourn after this. No, it's in the notes, clearly states that I can adjourn at any time, and this is the time I'm adjourning. So you've got to be not aggressive, but you've got to be assertive. Otherwise, managers will just walk over you.
And that's what I've seen with when I've been represented. It was one of the reasons why I got inspired to become a shop steward and a trade unionist, because I was represented so badly. That made me think, well, I could do a better job. If I'm being represented this badly, what is everyone else going through?
Yeah.
And that led to a change of culture as well, because it got to the point whereby the culture of management was you do as we tell you to, forget what the company policy is. And if we want to put you into harm's way, we will. And there's nothing you can do about that. And that I thought was an injustice at the place I was working at the time. It led to the fight back. And I suppose with yourself, running a campaign to raise the profile of the union, especially when you're doing it either in transport and so on and so forth, where you don't get to see the people all the time because they may not necessarily be in the same place of work. They'll be out on the road and stuff like that. How did you overcome those kind of challenges, for recruitment things?
Again, if you take on the role of a rep or shop steward, whatever you want to call us, you've got to remember, ultimately you're a volunteer, but you've taken on that role. So be committed to that role. Make yourself available, and that's what I've done up until recently, which was just this year, because I'm now medically retired. But while I was still active, my members could contact me anytime, night or day. If I wasn't available, leave me a message. I will get back to you. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to be committed. You've got to put in 100% if you want to make sure that you have 100% membership. There's no point in recruiting people and then just leaving them out to fend for themselves. That's not what you promised them. You promised them, I'm going to work on your behalf. you're making a promise to them that I'm going to do my best to make sure that you are protected to the best of my ability. My ability might not be that great because I'm just a new rep, but I will know where to find that answer. When I first started out, if I didn't have all the answers, I wouldn't lie to my member. I would say, I'll get back to you in about an hour or two. If not today, I'll be back to you tomorrow and I'll have the information you need. And then I would go and find it, whether it be from an area organiser or ACAS itself. A simple phone call to ACAS usually solves everything.
Yeah, I found the same thing too. It's amazing the resources that we've actually got at our fingertips.
Yeah.
You know, from the trade union's own legal department, whichever trade union you're part of, whether it's GMB, Unite, USDOR, Unison, they have a specific legal department that will be able to answer these things, and ACAS then comes in to help with the conciliation side of things.
Yeah.
Although ACAS has also changed as well over the years in many aspects, like early conciliation and how to go about getting things done. Even the advent of the internet, where they put all the resources and finding an easy to use tick box would be the best way of putting
Yeah.
it. I've thought it's been absolutely fantastic. Fan in the background, that's the way it is. I want to now go into a little bit more, because you've done not only with the representation, but also you've mobilized and organized the workforce in more
Yeah.
ways than one to either get policies changed or bring about issues in the workplace and highlight them to management, and then get resources like funding allocated or changes to working practices. How did you start the negotiation process? What made you go down that sort of road?
The simplest way to do it is to have a conversation. Go and speak to the managers and say to them, listen, this is a problem, or this is what we need to be looking at. Can we have a sit down chat over a coffee? You don't have to be gung-ho and straight in there and shooting fire and blood and everything else. A simple sit down over a cup of coffee, a quiet chat, a civilised chat can sometimes resolve everything that you want. And then if not, they could say, well, I don't have the authority. And we'll say, right, okay, let's set up a meeting and I'll bring some of my boys, you bring some of yours, and we'll sit round the table and have a wee chat and bring the people that can make these decisions.
And that's the funny thing. That is the funny thing, that a lot of times we've been brainwashed into thinking it is going in all guns blazing.
Yeah.
Your guard is up, you're ready to fight. But sometimes it can just be a quick cup of coffee.
Yeah, most of the time you'll find.
Thank you. The cat's just come into the house and is underneath my feet at the moment. I had best laid plans for this. Everything was all worked out absolutely fine. But as Davie McCuish said earlier on in the break, before the break kicked in, never work with kids and parents in the house.
Yeah.
But this is what makes it different compared to a very polished in a studio environment, because you get the real. Everything's realistic here. And, and that's what I want to also showcase as well. We're ordinary people here. We put ourselves into extraordinary situations to help other people. And sometimes the best people I've represented are ones that can't raise their voices. They've found it difficult to find their voice or the confidence. And when you start giving the knowledge and information to others, like I use a notice board. I used to use a notice board a hell of a lot and put in the policies and grievances. This is what you can do. Managers can't do this. You can do this. That kind of stuff. And it started to change the culture overnight. And even the approaches that you have a quick cup of coffee, you're always going to have people that are going to be against even that because they're anti-union to begin with. And a lot of that stems from, I don't know where it stems from, because the unions are there to make the working life better for all. If it happens for the members, all the workforce is affected by it, including the managers. So, how did you overcome obstinate or very tough nuts to crack? You must have had quite a few there.
I did. I had quite a lot. I just signed the managers up as members, but that's beside the point.
That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, but the thing is, I've never went into a meeting or never had a conversation with a manager that started off with, well, me as a shop steward. It started off with me as an employee, me as a colleague, me as an individual. And then I suppose it's a tactic that I've worked up over the years. I start to manipulate it round to the union and what we expect. I know what they expect, but this is what we expect from you if you expect this from us. We're willing to give you the 100%, but it's like everything else. If you want 100% from your workforce, you need to put 100% into your workforce. You can't just sit back and say, right, we want this done, without thinking about it. Is there a health and safety issue? Have we done a risk assessment? Have we done this? You know, you don't go in shouting and blazing about that. You just go, I noticed, by the way, when I was passing by, that bumper on that van. Do you want to have a look? You know, don't say you haven't done your job right. You haven't been doing a van check. You know, I was just passing by and I noticed that the T-bar is a bit bashed. Did you notice it earlier at all? They might lie to you and say, oh yeah, I noticed it and I've wrote it down. They haven't checked it, but you know they haven't checked it. But you give them that opportunity.
What you've put on there, what you've just done, is illustrate the art of conversation, the art of
Yeah.
negotiation. And that seems to have become lost in all the education which is out there about trade unionism. How to talk to people.
Yeah.
You know, how
It's
to influence.
how to make friends and influence people.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I seriously feel that is lacking with a lot of the younger or newer people to the trade union movement over the last couple of years. Again, from my story is quite well known that I was influenced by the mafia movies to become a trade unionist, like The Sopranos. Hey everyone, I got this massage gun from TikTok shop. I'm doing a quick review on it. So you have the gun itself, 4 different heads, and they're all worth it. Easy to fit on heads, easy to turn on, and different settings. So whatever kind of job you do, warehouse, driving, if you're coming back from the gym, hard day at work, this is ideal and easy interchangeable. Even massaging, different muscle groups, different settings. And if you put more pressure on it, it will put more pressure on the muscle too. And this is really good value for money. I got it from the TikTok shop and you won't regret it. Costs less than £20 compared to Amazon, over 50. So get yours on the TikTok shop today. Or, you know, The Godfather, because the trade unionists got the money and got rich by doing very little. Bollywood movies showed the same thing. But that wasn't the reality. That was just fan fiction. The reality is completely different. It is doing the hard negotiation, putting that target on your back and making sure that you're doing the right stuff for the members. So when you was, and again, I'm pretty sure I'm going into this, but the likelihood is it's happened. You did put a target on your back. People did come after you because you did have a lot of success.
Yeah. It wasn't just from management, believe it or not. You probably experienced it yourself as a shop steward, is that members will come after you as well.
Yeah.
Because they feel as if you haven't represented them properly or whatever. When I'm speaking to new reps, when I build my rep base in my workplace, I make sure and say to them, never ever promise something you cannot keep. Never make a promise. You always say, I'll do my best. That's all you can do, but always be honest. You know, if you know that somebody doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell, don't lie to them and say, I'll get you off. Just say, this is going to be tough, but I'll do what I can, as long as you're honest with me. And a lot of times, people not accept that. It's human nature. No, you says at the very start, you would protect my job. No, I'll protect what I can in your job, but the rest is up to you. You've got to do just as much as me. You need to do your job for me to protect it, you know, and you do get members who are disillusioned. You do get members who are going to say, well, I don't like the way this is working. Well, unfortunately, that is company policy. We can't change policy overnight. What I can do, and I was quite fortunate to have been on the National Negotiation Committee with one of our national officers who's no longer a national officer. He's enjoying his happy retirement. You probably remember him, Dave Gill.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
I've heard the name.
Yeah, he was he's a magician. But we used to sit around the table and we would get policy changes with company. We would get a good deal for the workers. But as I said to the workforce, I can try. I'll take it forward, but I can't promise you anything. I'll do the best I can for you. And that's all you need to keep reminding them, is that I'll do the best I can for you. I'm not promising you anything. And that's what I teach my new reps, is never make a promise, because you can never keep it. Promises can be pie crust, promises easily made and easily broken, as Mary Poppins once said. But that's the idea behind it, is to always make sure that you reassure them that you're there for them. Sometimes that reassurance will backfire on you, and they'll expect more than you're able to bring to the table. And that does kind of get their back up. But you just need to keep reminding them as well, sorry, but you broke the law. Of course they're going to be calling you in. I'll do the best I can, but I cannot promise you.
And that goes for any industry, because you've done it in transport, retail, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of cross-pollination when it comes to representation, when it comes to organizing and mobilizing the workforce. One of my original tutors, Terry Lauder, God rest his soul, stated to antagonize, to be able to get things done, because sometimes you do have to antagonize. I changed it for myself to empowering, rather than antagonize, and empower the workforce so that they can then take action. But that's a different ball game there. And I take it from here, because of your sense of justice in terms of the trade union side of things, you want to make greater changes, and hence why you moved into the world of politics as well. So tell me, how did the skills that you developed as a trade unionist, did they help you within your political journey?
They did. Again, going back to my childhood, knowing how the labour movement had begun, how it was formed, and knowing that it was a trade union movement that was actually built up into a political party. And Usdaw obviously were in there from the beginning. Different name at the time, but I think we've had 3 name changes since then. But we were in at the grassroots of the formation of the Labour Party. But my mum and dad, they both got to see firsthand the very first Labour government in 1945 under Clement Attlee.
Wow.
The introduction of the National Health Service, the introduction of the welfare state, the introduction of houses for homeless people, the rebuilding of the United Kingdom. So they were teenagers themselves then. I think in 1945 my dad was 18 and my mum was 16. So they got to see firsthand. Again, because of the trade union movement, you'll find that most of them are affiliated to the Labour Party. So you want to look in. It's all about finding out where everything came from and what started it off, and so on and so forth. Like the trade union movement, where did it begin? How did it happen? How many of your members know about the Toll Puddle matters? They don't do the research. They're not interested. They just want to look after their job. But to me, I research everything. It must be an in thing. It's ground into me because of my being a shop steward for so long, that I research everything, so I'll question everything.
But you had the Toll Puddle martyrs, you had Charterism, which is the original Labour Party and its foundations. I've done a video series on the history of the trade union movement in the UK from its beginnings to the year 2000 and the legal changes. So if you guys ever see it on YouTube, check it out. It's a great series, easy to digest. But you're right. The sheer background in terms of putting the target on your back to protect others, it's a highly honourable thing, highly honourable. And yes, sometimes, as a casualty, you may lose your job, but you've done it for the right reasons, because jobs, there's always something better around the corner, always. Someone will always say, all right, you know what, you stuck your neck out for these guys, you're a good guy, let's reward you for that at least.
The bad news for my ex-employer is that I think they were quite happy that they medically retired me. What they didn't realise is that all these members still have my phone number, so when they have a problem, they phone me up and I'll go, right, this is where you go.
Yeah, I had the same thing too with my ex-employer.
So they don't seem to understand that. But with my Labour involvement, with my local CLP, I'm on their executive committee. But with employees, with colleagues, when they realise that you're part of the Labour movement, they start to get a bit concerned. And it's to reassure them that I'm not asking them to become a member of the Labour Party. I'm not interested in who they vote. However, what I will say is that they've got a problem if they think that the New Deal for workers, because we've now, Labour have increased the pay deal, minimum pay, and they've obviously put up national insurance for employers, not employees.
Mm.
You know, they're going to be getting rid of people because the employers can't afford this, and the employers. It's scaremongering. If we go back to the end of the millennia,
They had that with the national minimum wage.
the national minimum wage was a scare tactic used by the opposition, because when Blair brought that in, we can't afford that. All of a sudden they're able to afford it because they were losing workforce and they were losing money themselves. So they had to re-establish themselves as a company and bring in the workforce and pay them the wage. And the exact same thing, it's just swings and roundabouts. It's going back round and doing a full circle. And we're scaremongering again by saying, oh, we're going to have to cut workforce because we can't afford this. Yeah, by all means, cut the workforce. But do remember that the workforce that you're going to be left with is going to be so short that you're going to have to actually go out and do a day's graft yourself, something you haven't done in your lifetime.
Hey everyone, you might be lucky to get safety boots from your employer. And these are absolutely fine to have, but guess what? They don't necessarily have the right supports and can leave you feeling aches and pains, especially in your arches at the end of the day, leading to fallen arches. So make sure you get some arch supports. These are useful. They slip into your boot and give the same comfort as trainers, enabling you to walk around all day long, doing all the heavy lifting, no matter what the job is that you're doing, and you won't feel any pain at the end of the day. They will leave you feeling really good at the end of the day, so make sure you order yours at the TikTok shop for the price of less than a packet of chips.
Well, how many people who are employed are on universal credit?
Yeah.
And that's at least 37, 38%. The last time I checked, it's creeping up and up. And then a high proportion of those people are using food banks. The sad thing is from 15 years ago now, but 14 years of Conservative Party rule where they were supposed to be the party of business. That wasn't the case. It was a party of the 1%. Because if it was a party of business, they would have opened up a lot of the regulations. They closed the regulations. Labour under Blair and Brown opened up more of the regulations to allow more trades to come in, allow more people to get employed, as well as keeping it safe and, working with the trade union movement. Funny enough, working with the trade union movement. This is where I find a lot of the Conservative Party's rhetoric is not pro-business or pro-entrepreneur. I find it is actually anti in much of their attitude. It's compliance heavy to restrict, but I could talk about Brexit as a great example, They sold a bunch of stuff, didn't come to fruition. It was actually to benefit them, a couple of their rich friends.
Yeah.
But really wasn't there to benefit the masses because we closed off much of the legislation or any of the regulatory things that were brought in by the EU to allow businesses to thrive through trade and so on and so forth. Look, I could go into that, but I think that would be a separate episode. But from your sort of, you're right. The trade union movement.
My industry, which is transport. Obviously, even though I moved from Transport in General, who then became Unite, and I left them once they did that. Well, even with us though, the main part of my deal was working in transport. I was on the transport committee for 6-7 years or whatever. When Brexit came through, the transport industry was hit so bad because we had a lack of drivers. We had no class 1 drivers because they'd all been shipped back to Eastern Europe, and then they had to rethink the whole thing. It's like, unfortunately, Labour did the exact same thing when they did away with the winter fuel payment and then had to U-turn on it and properly assess it for means testing.
Yeah. The criticisms are there. They rushed it. They rushed everything. And they should have taken that little bit of time. They had the time to do that.
Yeah. So, we have our faults, but most of the time, if you look at what the promises are, unfortunately, human nature, we expect everything at the drop of a hat. We expect it. This is what Labour promised. They haven't come across. Hang on. The New Deal for workers is still coming through. Extra protection for workers. Day one rights for workers. As Doris proved, with the fight against Tesco's in the Supreme Court, that we can get rid of fire and rehire, so it is possible. It has been proved in the Supreme Court, not even a high court. The highest court in the land has said, no, you can't be doing this. So through Usdaw, we've proved that can be done. Labour's already promised that that's going to be part of it. So his name is Keir Starmer, not Harry Potter. He doesn't just wave a magic wand.
And again, you've then got other people within that party as well.
Yeah.
You have the Rachel Reeves, you've got Angela Rayner, and they're all responsible because it's government.
Yeah.
Government has too many different things to run within the country. It's not a company that run, and countries have to, David Lammy right now, the way how he is reacting and putting things forward as Foreign Secretary, he's doing an amazing job. For all the issues that he may have in terms of Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, the United States, he's balancing, the juggling act is extremely talented to be able to handle it with the poise that he's got. You got to take your hats off to that.
Yeah. And on another sort of down note for Labour, if you'll have noticed most recently with the local elections about the creeping up of reform, I would advise people to be careful what you wish for, because Mr Farage, during the general election, couldn't even be bothered to support his own party in the general election. He was too busy rubbing shoulders with Donald Trump over in the USA. And then he brings back to the UK some of their idealisms. If you take into consideration, yes, our NHS was on its knees, but thanks to Labour, and I can speak personally on this because I've noticed it on a personal issue, the drop in the waiting time. I went to see my doctor. Within the space of 6 weeks, I had seen my doctor, a consultant, I had a pre-op, and I've had surgery. In the space of 6 weeks, they've massively cut the waiting times. Reform were to get their own way. Farage has made no secret that he wants to go down the road of the way Americans run it, which is to have health insurance. What if you can't afford it? We're struggling to put food on the table. How on earth are we going to afford an extra outgoing for medical insurance for every member of your family?
This is the problem, is that they've got the 80-20 rule is now switched to the 1% 99% rule, where the ultra rich can have everything and everyone else can suffer. But it's like, okay, because if you, now having worked in financial services, selling private medical insurance, it's not easy, especially if you're dealing with pre-existing conditions. It doesn't jump you ahead of the queue in terms of emergencies because you still have to go through NHS. There's a lot of things which are out there where people aren't fully aware of it. Yes, you may get access to a slightly cleaner hospital, but it still won't be like the Lister Hospital, which deals with the royal family. Within, it would be just slightly better. Why not take that funding? And this is where the Conservatives, whenever they do come to power, they do look to try and dismantle the NHS.
Yeah.
And when people like Ian Dale say, well, it should have been dismantled then, shouldn't it? No, because as an organization, it is one of the biggest organizations out there on the planet. Single biggest employer, single biggest, and so many moving parts to it. You can't dismantle it within 10, 12. It will take 30 years to dismantle something like that because it's grown a life of its own in more ways than, it's got its own governance and so on and so forth. It just has to be functioning properly. And Labour, West Street and fair dues to him, he's gone against a lot of what the traditional rhetoric is, but he's gone in with the attitude of, we've got to sort this out. And you're right. People are benefiting from it. The waiting times are down and more importantly, people are being seen. Their health is being protected. And so fair dues. So in your experience, anyone who's looking to go into the world of politics from the trade union side of things, what should they do?
As much research as possible and don't read what's in the newspapers. Avoid any tabloid. If you're going to do research, you may want to use Google. Don't use Wikipedia. But if you're going to use Google, use at least a decent, what's it called? I used it for university.
Search engine?
No, it was a Google site. Like we've got Google Maps and such.
Yeah.
but it's an academic for Google.
Okay.
And I'll give you papers that are cited, you know, so you know how you'll be able to then check up and say, right, so it's had so many, it's cited by so many. Google Scholar, I think it's called.
Okay. I'll check that
And
one
it's
out.
absolutely great if you want to do research, because it gives you a lot of academic papers. So if you want to check the history of politics, that's the best place to be checking.
Definitely, I'll be checking that one out as well, because again, trade unionism and politics works hand in hand in more ways than one because of
Yeah.
the influence. This is the thing that people tend to forget. Trade unions have access. They've got access to employers. They've got access to the decision makers. They've got access to legislation and access to the politicians who can turn legislation into
Yeah.
statute and put it onto the books and then apply that information quite quickly. And the skills that are developed is, especially for someone like myself in a very short period of time, is immense because you are literally throwing yourself into it. You're throwing yourself into protecting workers, so therefore you are forcing yourself to research. You're forcing yourself
Yeah.
to think analytically, so that you not to outwit, but to be able to put the case forward. Diplomacy to influence everyone, you know, so that you can organize and mobilize your workforce to get common things done. And then you can apply that within the world of politics and campaigning and canvassing and doors and
Yeah.
getting people to come out of their comfort zones to go out there, especially if, you know, with things like constituency Labour parties or CLPs, where they have different moving parts within there too. Like you've got someone who does fundraising, you have someone who does policy and puts
Yeah.
policy together. You've put forward to a national executive committee that can then formulate the policies for the Labour Party going forward. This is where it all starts. The wonderful thing that I've had about the trade union movement from my point of view is how many times did we ever sit in a canteen or in a pub and talk just for an hour, setting the world to rights, and after you finish your drink or your break, just go back to everything else. The trade union movement allows you to put the world to rights.
Yeah.
It gives you the skills to do that. But that's my take on it.
And most trade unions will be there. And it's the thing of being there for you. It's like a security blanket for most people. You know, we are there for you. And you've got to keep reassuring them that we are here.
Yeah.
In my case, I'm just a phone call away. But when I'm on
I'm not going to ask for
on
your
the
phone number.
premises,
I'm not going to ask for
you've
your
already
phone number
got
to
it.
be put on there. No, not for here. Not for here.
All right.
Yeah, I don't want people prank calling you.
No. But you've got, obviously they'll have their own shop stewards.
Yeah.
But if you're not a union member, you're not protected. Your job is like, how would you put it? It's like ice cream in the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been there. I've been on the other side where I wasn't a member of a trade union. And yeah, did I get the brunt of it? Lack of support, the bullying, the intimidation, the harassment. No, you didn't hit your targets. We've got to force you out, that kind of thing. And I had all of that. And yes, there is something to be, you know what? Yeah, to hell with this. I will go and find another job. But in this day and age where the job market is completely different to what it was even 6 years ago, completely different. You know, it's now very difficult. And we're seeing it more and more that people are not, they can't apply for the jobs the same way that you once able to.
Yeah.
Would be the best way to put it. So have that protection. That level of protection is an investment in yourself.
One of the things that I use now, I was using when I was out doing recruitment campaigns, was a story of a young boy. And I'd asked him if he was interested in joining the union. And his words to me were, I don't need a trade union. I can deal with it myself. This was at 10 o'clock in the morning during his break. By 12 o'clock that afternoon, I was still sitting in the canteen watching him being escorted off the premises.
Wow.
He had been fired 2 hours after I'd spoken to him because he went to the toilet without asking permission. So he left his workstation without permission. On his way out of the door, I says to him, well, if you get another job, the union will be there for you and it won't happen again. Unfortunately, I can't do nothing for you.
Yeah, I've seen that way
in
too
the
often.
in the space of 2 hours, he went from being employed to being escorted off the premises because he went for a pee.
Yeah, I've seen that way too often. Way too often. I've seen people give it the big the great I am. Now these guys can do anything to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to join the union. They get called into a meeting. They become from a lion to a mouse. Very quiet. They don't know what to do. Everything's all going belly up. And rather than coming out with maybe a minor conversation, first written warning kind of thing,
Yeah.
they may be on to a final, you
Yeah.
know, and I've seen that. I've seen how, things do change if you're a member of the union. But again,
Yeah.
it's down to the relationship with the shop steward as well. And the shop steward, like what you said before, they need to have that element of confidence. They need to be able to
Yeah.
understand things, say things accurately, have that art of conversation. There's a lot of things, a lot of working parts, not just the knowledge of the policies as well, but be able to convey it too in a calm, controlled manner. Unfortunately, I wasn't that guy when I first started.
Yeah.
Dave,
I've always been that way.
I should have learned from you a lot earlier. Now, we're coming close to the end of our session, and I loved this conversation to have with a fellow trade unionist. I always want to finish off on a positive note, and I always call this section a better tomorrow. And I want to get your take on, for the world of politics and the world of trade unionism, what you envisage will be a better tomorrow.
A better tomorrow is, to me, is a workforce and a management that can work together for the greater good of the country and each other. It's a symbiosis, you know. We should be working together hand in glove, and then everybody benefits. It's when I was a barman, when I was a bar manager, one of my favourite things was people would say to me, "How come you're selling your pints so cheap?" Because the more that I sell, obviously because I'm selling them cheap, the more I can give to my staff. You know, because I'll still make a profit.
Yeah.
It might be marginal, but I'll sell a hell of a lot more stock. I'll get a hell of a lot more customers. My staff are going to be in. They'll be run ragged because they'll start their shift, and before they know it, their shift's finished because they're going to be so busy. But it means that I can then give them a proper wage, you know. And if I can work like that with a small crew, why can't the bigger companies treat their staff like that? The better you treat your staff, the more they're going to work for you. The more they're going to want to work for you. The better effort they're going to put in. If you're nice to me, I'm going to be nice to you, and I will do my best to keep it that way. And I know that you'll do your best to keep it that way. And that way we work together and we reach one common goal, and that is everybody is happy and content.
This is absolutely magnificent. Dave, thank you so much for giving me this time.
No
And
worries.
more importantly, guys, I hope that you've enjoyed this every step of the way. You keep following the podcast, whichever platform you're watching this on. Please like, subscribe, share. If you've got any knowledge from this that you can apply, either for if you're going into the world of politics or into the world of trade unionism, whichever way you're looking at it, guys like Dave have not only just talked the talk, they've walked the walk for a lifetime. And I'm extremely proud to have had Davie McCuish on this podcast today. Dave,
Thanks for having me.
thank you so much for it all. I take it when you write your book and your memoirs on this, please let me know. I will send it out there. You know, I will promote it like crazy. And on that note, guys, I will leave you guys to it. Take care of yourself for the next time. See you later. Bye.
Right, bye-bye, mate.
And we...
Thank you for tuning in to the Unmatched podcast. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your feedback helps us grow and bring you even more incredible stories. And remember, if you're unmatched in your field and have a unique story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me at hadi.naqvi@googlemail.com. Let's inspire others together.